I passed out from a panic attack in the rain. When I woke up, I was on the Mafia boss's bed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. My name is Emily Carter, and the night everything changed started with rain soaking through my jacket like it had made a personal decision to reach my skin. It was close to 10 p.m., the kind of late where the city looks awake but feels abandoned, and I was walking because I needed the movement, because my thoughts were louder than traffic, because stopping felt dangerous. The rain wasn't violent, just steady, cold, relentless, tapping against my temples in time with the tightness growing in my chest. I tried counting my steps, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, the way my therapist taught me, but the numbers slipped away as my breath shortened and the sidewalk seemed to tilt. My fingers tingled, then went numb, and the space between each breath stretched too far, like someone had quietly moved the air farther from my lungs. I leaned against a brick wall, the grit biting into my palms, and told myself I was safe. That panic was a liar, that this would pass like it always did, but the city felt too big, and I felt too small, and my heart was racing as if it had decided to run without me. A bus hissed by, spraying water, headlights smearing into long white lines, and the sound made me flinch because everything was suddenly too much at once. My vision narrowed, edges darkening, and I focused on a streetlight across the road, counting the seconds it stayed green, trying to anchor myself to something solid. I thought about my apartment 6 blocks away, about the kettle I'd left on the counter, about the promise of dry socks and quiet, but my legs trembled as if they didn't believe me. The rain traced my hairline and slid down my neck, cold enough to make me gasp, and that gasp turned into a shallow flutter that wouldn't settle. I tasted metal at the back of my tongue and felt the familiar fear rise, not of dying, but of losing control in public, of being seen at my weakest, of becoming a problem someone else had to solve. I told myself to sit, to breathe, to ride it out, but the world dimmed, sounds muffled, and the sidewalk felt far away. I remember thinking that I should call someone, anyone, and then realizing my phone was in my bag and my hands wouldn't cooperate. The last thing I noticed was the rain dotting my sleeves like dark coins and the steady glow of headlights slowing nearby. And then the night folded inward, quiet and heavy, as my body finally gave up the fight. The first thing that came back to me was sound, muted and distant, like I was underwater listening to the world from the wrong side of the glass. The rain was still there, but softer now, no longer sharp against my ears, more like a memory than a sensation. I was aware of movement before I understood it, a steady forward motion that did not belong to my own body. My feet were no longer touching the ground. That realization flickered through my foggy thoughts without panic, as if my mind was too tired to be afraid yet. I drifted in and out, catching fragments instead of full moments. A door opening, the smell of clean leather, warmth replacing the cold that had soaked into my bones. Someone said my name, or maybe they were asking for it, the voice low and controlled, close enough that I felt the vibration more than I heard the words. I tried to answer, but my tongue felt thick, uncooperative, and the effort slipped away from me. The motion changed, smoother now, and I realized I was lying down, supported, not falling anymore. My breathing stuttered once, twice, then slowly began to even out, like my body was finally remembering how to take care of itself without asking permission. I felt a blanket or a coat being adjusted around my shoulders, careful, deliberate, as if whoever was doing it understood how fragile I felt without needing to be told. The cold retreated inch by inch, replaced by a quiet warmth that made my muscles loosen despite myself. I caught a glimpse of light through my lashes, dim and amber, passing in slow patterns, and understood distantly that we were moving through the city. The engine hummed beneath me, steady and reassuring, not rushed, not aggressive. At some point, my hand twitched, a reflex more than a decision, and I felt fingers close around it briefly, grounding me, not tight, just enough to let me know I was not alone in the dark space I had slipped into. That small contact anchored me more than anything else at all night. My thoughts tried to form questions. Where am I? Who is this? Am I safe? But they dissolved before reaching my lips, sinking back into the heavy quiet inside my head. I faded again, not into nothing, but into a softer place, where fear did not follow so closely. When I surfaced the second time, the rain was gone. I could tell because the air smelled different, cleaner, and because there was a stillness that had not existed before. The car slowed, then stopped, and I felt the subtle shift of weight as the engine turned off. A door opened somewhere near me, and cooler air brushed my face for a second before warmth returned. I was lifted again, smoothly, with an ease that suggested strength held carefully in check. I was aware of my head being supported, of my weight balanced so it did not pull or strain, and even through the haze, a strange sense of safety settled over me, unfamiliar and unwelcome and comforting all at once. I wanted to fight it, to demand answers, to insist on control, but my body refused, choosing rest instead. My cheek pressed briefly against a solid chest, and I registered the steady rhythm of another heart, calm, unhurried, completely unlike my own had been earlier. We moved through a quiet space, footsteps echoing faintly, then another door, another change in temperature. I was laid down gently on something soft, far softer than the sidewalk, far cleaner than anything I owned, and a final adjustment was made, a pillow under my head, the blanket pulled higher. The voice came again, closer now, speaking softly, not to command, not to intimidate, but to reassure, even if the words themselves did not fully reach me. I clung to the tone instead, letting it carry me the rest of the way. As sleep finally claimed me for real, unaware that this was the moment my life had quietly crossed into someone else's world. When I woke again, it was slower this time, like my body was negotiating with the idea of consciousness instead of being forced into it. The first thing I noticed was stillness. No traffic, no rain, no sirens folding into each other outside my window. Just quiet, thick and controlled, the kind of quiet that felt intentional. My eyes opened to a ceiling I did not recognize, smooth and pale, lit by a soft recessed glow that made it impossible to tell whether it was early morning or still night. The air was warm but not stuffy, carrying the faint scent of clean fabric and something sharper beneath it, not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. I stayed still, afraid that moving too quickly would shatter whatever fragile balance my body had found. My panic had retreated, not gone, but distant, like a tide pulled back just far enough to breathe. I became aware of the bed beneath me, wide and firm, nothing like the sagging mattress in my apartment. The sheets were cool against my skin, tucked neatly, not tangled, and that alone made my chest tighten with a different kind of unease. This was not a hospital. There were no beeping machines, no antiseptic smell, no plastic rails. This was someone's private space. I turned my head slowly, and the room came into focus piece by piece. Dark wood furniture, a chair placed with precision near the window, heavy curtains drawn just enough to let a sliver of city light slip through. Everything felt deliberate, as if nothing here had ever been left to chance. That was when I sensed him before I saw him. Presence is the only word that fits. Not movement, not sound, but weight. The way a room feels different when someone who belongs in it is standing nearby. I shifted my gaze toward the far side of the room and found him leaning against the edge of a desk, arms crossed, posture relaxed in a way that told me it was practiced, earned. He was tall, dressed simply in a dark shirt and slacks, no jacket, no tie, yet nothing about him felt casual. His attention was fixed on me, not invasive, not predatory, just focused, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. Our eyes met, and something in my stomach dropped. His expression was calm, unreadable, the kind of control that did not need to announce itself. He did not rush toward me. He did not speak right away. He simply watched, giving me space to realize where I was, to understand that I was awake and safe enough to process it. When he finally moved, it was unhurried, one step closer, then another, stopping well short of the bed. Close enough to be present, far enough to not crowd me. "You fainted," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying no accusation. "In the rain. I did not think you should wake up alone on the street." I swallowed, my throat dry, my mind scrambling to catch up with my body. "Where am I?" came out quieter than I intended, fragile despite my effort to sound composed. My guest room, he replied. You needed rest. A doctor checked you. You are fine. The way he said it made it feel less like reassurance and more like a statement of fact. I pushed myself up slightly, the room not spinning, my breath staying even, and that alone felt like a small victory. I looked down at myself, fully clothed, shoes gone, my jacket folded neatly on a chair across the room. Nothing was out of place. Nothing had been touched without purpose. That detail mattered more than I could explain. Who are you? I asked. He considered the question, then answered simply. Dominic Hale. The name settled into the room with him. Heavy, final, carrying implications I could not yet see, but somehow felt. I am not used to strangers waking up in my home. He continued, his gaze steady. But tonight, leaving you there was not an option. Something in his words told me this was not a man who explained himself often, and the fact that he was doing it now was not for his benefit. It was for mine. I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself listening, acutely aware that whatever line my life had crossed in the rain, I was standing on the other side of it now, looking at a man whose world operated by rules I did not yet understand. The silence after his name settled between us felt heavier than the rain had, not uncomfortable, but charged, like the pause before a decision. Is made. I shifted again, swinging my legs slowly over the side of the bed, testing the ground beneath my feet, as if the floor itself might reveal something about where I was. The rug was thick, soft, expensive in a way that did not need to show off, and the coolness beneath it told me I was fully awake now. Dominic did not move to help me, did not reach out, and that restraint felt intentional. He was watching, not to control, but to assess, giving me space to claim my own balance. I stood, my knees steady, my breath even, and that alone made me feel stronger than I had an hour earlier. I should go home, I said, more out of habit than certainty. The words felt small in the room, like they were not sure they believed themselves. Dominic inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the statement without agreeing or disagreeing. You can, he replied. Not yet. The way he said it was calm, factual, without threat, and that somehow made it harder to argue. I folded my arms loosely across my chest, more for comfort than defense, and took in the room again, noticing details I had missed before. A glass of water on the nightstand, untouched but ready. My phone beside it, plugged in, the screen dark. He had thought of things I had not even realized I would need. My pulse quickened, not with panic this time, but with awareness. Why not yet? I asked. Because you collapsed from exhaustion and anxiety in public, he said, meeting my eyes. And because people do not simply collapse unless something has been building for a long time. Because I will not send you back out until I am sure you will make it there without ending up on the pavement again. His words were not judgmental. They were observant. That unsettled me more than anger would have. I looked away, my gaze drifting to the narrow window, to the city beyond, still and distant. I had not realized how close I had come to the edge until someone else named it out loud. I am not your responsibility, I said quietly. No, he agreed. But you are in my house. And while you are here, you are under my protection. The phrase landed differently than I expected. Protection. Not possession. Not obligation. A boundary drawn with care. I let out a breath I had been holding without realizing it and nodded once, conceding the moment without surrendering myself. He gestured toward the door with an open hand. There is a bathroom down the hall if you need it. Fresh clothes are on the chair. They are clean and unused. When you are ready, there is food. Nothing heavy. He turned slightly away then, offering me privacy without leaving the room entirely, his presence still anchoring the space. That choice told me more about him than any explanation could have. I crossed the room, my steps quiet, aware of the way he deliberately focused his attention elsewhere, respecting a line that mattered. In the bathroom, the mirror showed a version of myself I barely recognized, hair damp and flattened, eyes tired but clear, colors slowly returning to my face. I splashed cool water on my cheeks, grounding myself in the sensation, reminding my body that the danger had passed. When I returned, dressed in borrowed comfort that fit better than I expected, Dominic was standing near the window, speaking quietly into his phone, his tone clipped, controlled, ending the call the moment he noticed me. All set, he asked. I nodded. He motioned toward a small dining area adjacent to the bedroom, where simple food was arranged neatly, nothing excessive, nothing rushed. We sat across from each other, the distance deliberate, and for a few minutes, we ate in silence, the normalcy of the act calming my nerves further. "You can rest here tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we will talk about what comes next. Not because you owe me anything, but because tonight did not happen by accident." I looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had found me in the rain and chosen restraint where he could have chosen control, and I understood that whatever path I had stepped onto was not one I could walk backward from unchanged. I nodded once more, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, feeling the weight of the night settle into something quieter, something that felt like the beginning of a truth I was not yet ready to name. Morning arrived quietly, announced not by an alarm but by a subtle shift in the light filtering through the curtains, pale and steady, like the city was holding its breath. I woke before I meant to, my body conditioned to tension, but this time my chest did not seize and my thoughts did not scatter. For a moment, I lay still, listening, cataloging the unfamiliar calm. The bed no longer felt like a threat, just a place where I had slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks. When I sat up, my head was clear, my hands steady, and that alone felt like a small miracle. I found Dominic in the kitchen area, already awake, already dressed, standing near the counter with a cup of black coffee cradled loosely in one hand. He looked different in daylight, not softer, but sharper, more defined, like the shadows that had cloaked him the night before had been peeled away to reveal something even more solid beneath. He acknowledged me with a nod, nothing performative, nothing rushed. "You slept," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I replied, surprised by the strength in my own voice. He gestured toward the counter where a simple breakfast waited: toast, fruit, another glass of water. "Eat first," he said. "Then we talk." I did as he asked, not because he told me to, but because the suggestion felt practical, grounded, and I realized how hungry I actually was. We sat across from each other again, the table between us acting as a neutral line neither of us crossed. When I finished, he set his cup down and finally studied me with full attention, not intrusive, just thorough. "Tell me about the panic," he said. "What triggered it?" The directness caught me off guard, but there was no demand in his tone, only expectation. I hesitated, then spoke, words spilling out more easily than I expected, about long hours, about pressure that never seemed to lift, about the constant feeling of being one misstep away from everything unraveling. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable but intent, as if each detail mattered. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You have been carrying too much alone," he said. "People think strength means silence. It does not." I laughed softly at that, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully accurate. "You sound like you know this from experience," I said. His gaze sharpened, just slightly. "I learned early what happens when weakness is mistaken for permission," he replied. The room felt heavier for a second, the implication hanging there, but he did not elaborate, and I did not press. "There are things you should know," he continued. "Not because you are involved, but because honesty matters if you are to walk out of here clear-headed. My name carries weight in this city. It attracts attention, sometimes the wrong kind. You were seen last night, not as a target, but as an anomaly." That word made my stomach tighten. Anomaly. Something that did not fit. "Someone noticed you," he went on, meeting my eyes. "Someone curious enough to ask questions. I will handle that. But it means you will not leave without being aware of your surroundings for a while." The instinctive protest rose in my chest, but I held it back, reading the seriousness in his face. "I do not want protection I did not ask for," I said carefully. He accepted that without offense. "You are not asking," he said. "I am offering. There is a difference, and you are free to decline." The choice settled in front of me, heavier than it should have been for a man I had met less than a day ago. Yet nothing about him felt impulsive. Everything about him suggested foresight. "If I say no," I asked, "what happens?" He did not hesitate. "I make sure you get home safely. I make sure no one follows." And then I stepped back. "But if you say yes," I added. His gaze held mine. "Then we proceed with awareness. With boundaries. With respect." The word respect landed like a promise, not an excuse. I looked around the apartment, at the quiet order, the intentional calm, at the man who had pulled me out of the rain without asking for anything in return, and I realized the night had already changed me. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. He did not smile. He simply inclined his head, acknowledging the decision. Good, he replied. Then let us make sure you never end up on the sidewalk again. The day unfolded with a quiet structure that felt intentional, not restrictive, like someone had built a calm around me and expected me to step into it at my own pace. Dominic did not hover. That alone surprised me. He moved through his space with the ease of someone used to command, yet he let me set my rhythm, choosing when to speak, when to sit, when to retreat into silence. After breakfast, he handed me my phone without comment, already charged, notifications untouched, as if even my digital life had been respected. I checked messages slowly, bracing for the usual spike of anxiety, but nothing urgent waited there, and the relief settled deeper than I expected. Dominic watched from a distance, not my screen, but my posture, my breathing, the small tells I did not realize I was giving off. When my shoulders tensed, he noticed. When my hands stilled, he noticed that too. You do not have to stay in that room all day, he said after a while. There is a terrace. Fresh air helps. The suggestion felt normal, almost domestic, and I realized how starved I had been for normal. The terrace overlooked the city from a height that should have intimidated me, but the railing was solid, the space wide, the sky open. Dominic stood a few steps back, giving me the view without crowding it. I breathed in deeply, the air cool and clean, and for the first time in days, my chest did not tighten in response. He did not comment on it. He simply let the moment exist. Later, a doctor arrived, not rushed, not dramatic, checking my vitals with professional calm, confirming what my body already knew, that I had pushed myself too far for too long. Dominic stayed in the background, arms crossed, listening, asking precise questions, nothing invasive, everything practical. When the doctor left, Dominic turned to me. No work today, he said. No obligations. Your only responsibility is to recover. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again, realizing how deeply ingrained my need to justify rest had become. Instead, I nodded. He accepted that without comment. The afternoon passed in small, grounding activities. A light meal. Music played low enough to be ignored if I wanted. A book placed on the table without pressure to read it. Each gesture felt calibrated, not indulgent, not dismissive. At one point, I caught myself watching him from across the room, noting how he checked his phone with efficiency, how he gave instructions quietly, how people responded without question, and how none of that spilled over onto me. The contrast was striking. You are different with them, I said before I could stop myself. His gaze lifted, curious but not defensive. Different how? More controlled, I replied. With me, you are careful. A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. You are not part of that world, he said. You should not have to adapt to it. The simplicity of that statement landed harder than any declaration could have. As evening approached, the city lights flickered on one by one, and a familiar restlessness stirred in my chest. Not panic, but uncertainty about what came next. Dominic noticed, of course. He always noticed. You can stay another night, he said, as if reading my thoughts. Or I can have you driven home. Your choice. The fact that the decision was mine steadied me. I considered my apartment, the narrow hallway, the echoes of stress that lived in its walls, and then I considered the calm I had found here, fragile but real. Another night, I said quietly. He nodded once. Then another quiet rule settled between us, unspoken but clear. I was not here because I was weak. I was here because someone had recognized my breaking point and chosen to meet it with restraint. As I prepared for sleep again, slipping between clean sheets with a body that no longer trembled, I realized that protection did not always announce itself with force. Sometimes it showed up as space, as patience, as the rare and powerful act of letting someone heal without demanding anything in return. The shift came so quietly that I almost missed it, a subtle tightening of the air rather than an obvious alarm. It started with Dominic checking his phone more often, not anxiously, but with increased precision, his attention narrowing in a way I recognized from the night before, when he had spoken about awareness as if it were a second language. I noticed it because he did not try to hide it from me. That honesty mattered. We were in the living area, late afternoon light stretching across the floor, when he received a message that made his jaw set just slightly. He looked up at me immediately, as if measuring how much truth I could handle without tipping me back toward panic. You are safe, he said first, grounding the moment before anything else. That word again. Safe. Then he continued. Someone asked about you today. The sentence landed softly, but carried weight. Asked how I managed to collapse in the rain and disappear without an ambulance report. Asked who brought you inside. My stomach tightened, instinctively, but the familiar spiral did not follow. I took a slow breath instead. Who, I asked. He did not answer directly. Someone curious. Not dangerous. Yet. The way he said yet was calm, not ominous, but it carried the implication of preparation rather than fear. I sat down, needing the support of the couch, even though my legs felt steady. I did not think anyone would notice me, I said. Dominic regarded me for a moment, then spoke carefully. Most people go unseen their entire lives. That night, circumstances aligned differently. You were visible at the wrong moment. That does not make this your fault. The distinction mattered more than he knew. He explained without drama, outlining the city as a web of attention, favors, and unanswered questions, where anything unusual drew a glance. You were an irregularity, he said, a variable without context. I will provide the context. I studied his face as he spoke, noting the complete absence of bravado. This was not a threat or a boast. It was a responsibility he had already assumed. What do I need to do, I asked. The fact that he did not immediately answer told me he was weighing honesty against protection. Live normally, he said finally. That is more difficult than it sounds. Do not change your routines abruptly. Do not withdraw. I will adjust the rest. The idea that my normal life required adjustment unsettled me, but I trusted the steadiness in his voice. He offered me my jacket, suggested a short walk, nothing dramatic, just enough to keep my body moving and my mind from fixating. Outside, the city felt the same as always, loud but indifferent, yet I was newly aware of how Dominic positioned himself, always slightly to my side, never blocking my view, never crowding my space. He did not skin faces obviously. He did not rush me. He simply existed with intent. Halfway down the block, I felt it, a flicker of unease, the sense of being observed that every woman knows but rarely names. I stopped. Dominic noticed instantly. What is it, he asked quietly. I do not know, I said, hating the uncertainty in my voice. He followed my gaze, then nodded once, as if confirming something he already suspected. That is fine, he said. Awareness is enough. We continued walking, and the feeling receded, replaced by a cautious calm. Back inside, Dominic made a call, his tone controlled, his words measured, ending it quickly. He turned to me afterward, expression composed. This will pass, he said. Attention always does when it finds nothing to feed on. You are not a weakness to be exploited. The statement was not reassurance. It was a boundary drawn on my behalf. That night, as I prepared for bed, I realized something had changed again. Not in the world outside, but in me. I was no longer reacting. I was observing. And in that awareness, guided by someone who treated my safety as a given rather than a favor, I felt a quiet resolve take root. Whatever this unseen curiosity was, whatever line I had brushed against, I was not facing it alone, and for the first time, that knowledge did not feel frightening. It felt grounding, like standing on solid ground after realizing how close I had come to the edge. The tension that followed did not explode. It pressed inward, reshaping the quiet we had built until it felt fragile, like glass under steady pressure. I felt it the next morning when I woke with purpose instead of calm, my mind already racing ahead, cataloging what staying meant versus what leaving would cost. Dominic noticed before I said a word. He always did. You were thinking about going home, he said, not accusing, just stating the obvious. I nodded, folding my hands together to keep them from shaking. I cannot live in limbo, I told him. I cannot measure my days by who might be watching. He listened without interruption, his expression attentive, thoughtful, as if my words mattered enough to deserve space. You should not have to, he agreed. But timing matters. I stood, pacing slowly, needing movement to think. I did not ask for any of this, I said. The attention, the adjustment, your world bleeding into mine. His gaze sharpened, not with anger, but with focus. I know, he said, and that is why I am being careful. I stopped pacing and faced him. Careful still feels like control when I am not the one choosing the parameters. The words hung between us, heavier than I intended. Dominic considered them, truly considered them, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, deliberate. Then choose, he said. Choose with full information, not with fear. He crossed the room slowly and stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard clearly, far enough to respect the line we had drawn from the start. If you walk out right now, you may be fine. Likely you will be. But there is a chance, small but real, that the curiosity does not fade as quickly as it should. That chance is what I am managing. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with frustration. I do not want to need this, I said quietly. He met my eyes. Needing safety is not weakness. Refusing it out of pride can be. The words stung because they were true. I looked away, toward the window, the city sprawling and indifferent below. I want my life back, I whispered. Dominic stepped back, giving me space again. Then let us define what that looks like, he said. Not my terms. Yours. We sat at the table, the same place where decisions had been quietly made before, and for the first time, the dynamic shifted. I spoke. I set boundaries. I named what I would accept and what I would not. No monitoring my messages. No altering my work schedule without my consent. No surprises. He listened, nodded, adjusted, never interrupting, never dismissing. When I finished, he responded with the same clarity, explaining what he could ensure and what he could not promise without lying. There was no drama in it. Just negotiation, grounded and honest. When we stood, something had changed again, subtle but profound. The imbalance I had feared had narrowed. You can leave today, he said, with precautions. Or you can stay one more night and leave tomorrow with a clearer picture of what comes next. The choice was real. I felt it in my bones. I weighed my desire to reclaim independence against the reality of what had unfolded, and for the first time, the decision was not driven by fear, but by strategy. Tomorrow, I said. He inclined his head, accepting it without comment. That evening passed quietly, tension easing into something more manageable, something respectful. As I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling I now recognized, I understood that power was not always about who controlled the situation. Sometimes, it was about who was willing to listen, to adjust, to let another person stand fully in their own agency. And in that realization, the crisis I had feared became something else entirely. Not a breaking point, but a turning one, where I stopped seeing myself as someone caught in another man's world and started recognizing my own strength reflected back at me, steady and intact. Morning came with clarity instead of urgency, the kind that feels earned rather than forced. I woke before Dominic, packed the small bag he had offered without ceremony, and stood by the window for a moment, watching the city resume its rhythm. Cars moved. People hurried. Nothing looked different, yet I knew I was. When Dominic appeared, already composed, he did not ask if I was ready. He simply nodded, as if readiness had been established the moment I chose it for myself. We went over the plan one last time, concise and practical. A ride home that would not draw attention. Check-ins that were optional, not demanded. A clear line I could cross back into my life without dragging his world behind me. He explained it all as if we were equals in the decision, and that mattered. At the door, he paused, giving me space to speak first. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate but honest. For the rain. For the restraint. For treating me like a person and not a problem. He studied me for a long second, then replied quietly. You were never a problem. You were a responsibility I chose to accept. Outside, the air was cool and bright, the city sharp with morning energy. The car ride was uneventful, intentionally so, and when we stopped in front of my building, Dominic did not get out. He did not follow me to the door. He did not linger. He simply met my eyes one last time. Remember what you learned about yourself, he said. Not about me. I nodded and stepped out, my feet finding familiar pavement, my keys warm in my hand. Inside my apartment, everything was exactly where I had left it, yet it felt different, quieter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. I unpacked, showered, and sat on my couch, letting the normalcy settle. The panic did not return. The memory of it did, sharp but manageable, a reminder rather than a threat. Over the next days, life resumed in careful increments. Work, errands, conversations. I noticed things more now. How I breathed when stress crept in. How I paused instead of pushing through exhaustion. How awareness did not have to become fear. Dominic did not intrude. He checked in once, a simple message asking if I had arrived safely. I replied that I had. That was all. And yet, when I walked home one evening and felt the echo of being watched, it passed quickly, dissipating without taking root. The curiosity had faded, just as he said it would, starved of spectacle, stripped of meaning. Weeks later, rain fell again, steady and cold, and I found myself smiling at it instead of bracing. I remembered the night it had nearly broken me, and the man who had refused to let that moment define me as weak. I understood now that protection was not a cage. It was a bridge, a temporary structure built so someone could cross from one version of themselves to another without falling. I did not belong to Dominic Hale. I did not owe him my silence or my future. What I carried forward was simpler and more powerful than that. The knowledge that when my world tilted, someone had met me with control instead of chaos, with respect instead of demand, and in doing so, reminded me of my own strength. I ruled my life again, not because I had never fallen, but because when I did, I learned how to stand back up with my eyes open, my breath steady, and my choices fully my own.